Welcome everyone to Chasing the Past. I got an interesting one today. So, something that I've recognized over the last, couple years is the connection to the phenomenon and religious ideology. They both go hand in hand. Now, this one, I've never heard of this, but it came across like my desk in my readings. But it was called the Book of, I think it's Jew, but it's J-E-U. Now, the connection that people make with this book is that it's another Gnostic gospel, it's another one of these, but technically it was found a long time ago. It was found before any of the other Gnostic texts. I'm checking my notes to be as accurate as possible. Yes, 1769. So, it's called the Bruce Codex. And so, James Bruce purchased it just like you would in any Gnostic, small shop in Upper Egypt. And it's, I got a lot of pictures, a lot of diagrams, and a lot of practical applications. But the thing that it does have connected to the phenomenon and some of these other out there theories is Jason Giorgiani, who's technically a philosopher, but he was giving this whole rundown of this podcast run that he's been on, and it's the simulation hypothesis, souls and containers, where the containers and the material. The soul is a commodity, perhaps an information system. I have a video that I'm making about that soon, and there's a unique way to tie both the modern understanding and interpretation and the Gnostic interpretation of the material world. And I thought it was really cool. So we're going more structured this time. I've got my notes ready. So the first section that we have to start with would be the Gnostic interpretation. And the piece specifically would be the Archons, right? Which, is the same as ruler or, principalities, that kind of deal from the Bible. Now, the Archons are the builders of the material universe, right? So they are usually associated as well with the 7 planets. And the task of these principalities or rulers in the material world is to prevent the soul from leaving that material world. And, we'll get into it later, but that also goes into, Jason Giorgiani's and just religious ideation in regards to reincarnation, right? The recycling of souls back into the system. And so the whole, it's kind of a, hate to kick it off on a negative note, but their job is to prevent true salvation. Now, I wanted to get super specific too with these, and there are 7 is a very common number, both whether it's biblical text, whether it's ancient religious text, right? It's all number 7, 12, right? It all has these kind of same number patterns. So, the burps again. It must be the Gatorade. Now, and something that I think we should keep in mind too, people who have an ideology that is strictly, let's say, fundamentalist, there are pieces of that fundamentalist property that play into a ton of these stories. And one of them just so happens to be, for me, it went straight Ezekiel, where the appearance of these Archons, right, are animal, androgynous beings, which is also common in the UFO community, these things being very androgynous, while their faces, right, are beasts, certain animals, lions, right? There's specific types that have this face. And it reminds me of Ezekiel, where he sees the 4 faces of this, I forget if it's the seraphim or I don't think it's the cherubim. Perfect. So it's Ezekiel 1:10. States that their faces look like this. Each of the four had the face of a human being. On the right side, each had the face of a lion. Left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. It is the cherubim. Okay. Nice. I said seraphim. I messed it up. That is my bad. Yeah, but it's the same kind of idea here. It's the symbolic representation of, this fundamentalist piece that also plays into Gnosticism and a bunch of these other, Egypt. Hello. Egypt. All their gods have animal faces. It's the same thing. Now, these Archons are associated with a planet, a planetary body, right? So it's usually the 7 Archons, the 7 worlds, the 7, planets, the 7 system, something related to 7. Now, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, and I don't speak Greek, but I will put the picture of the note of what it says. It looks like the Hebdomad, right? They are the 7 semi-hostile powers that are reckoned as the last and lowest emanations of the Godhead in total. Interesting already? Now, the funny part is, there are early Christian authors who validate this same thing. So Irenaeus tells us that the Holy Hebdomad is the 7 stars, which they call planets. I assume, Irenaeus is arguing about paganism and some of these other things. The connection of the 7 with these planets is also established both in the expositions back and forth between Celsus and Origen. So Origen, right, his teacher was Clement of Alexandria, right, one of the greatest Christian theological writers of the time, of the early church in general. And Celsus, or Celsus, not Celsius, Celsus, is a pagan author who is going back on Christianity, and they kind of have these expositions that go back and forth. And so they both discuss these, the 7 planets, the 7 Archons, the 7 bodies that govern this idea. And so I took a quote, and the guy's name is Wilhelm Ons, and he related the Gnostic, the Gnostic interpretation eschatology of, the soul's struggle with these Archons is this hostile attempt to, reach heaven. Your job is to go through these 7, and then, boom, you get to go to in this case, it'd be the Pleroma if it's Gnostic. But something I didn't know, right, and I'm reading it right here, this shares a close parallel of the soul's ascent in Babylonian astrology, right? And so it's the same way they have to move through the realms, 7 realms, the realms of the 7 planets to get to Anu. So, top god, top dude. And, I would say that taking something, and again, remember, the early Israelites there was that exilic period where Babylon the Babylonian, let me restart. The Babylonians came in, took over the land, and then they were exiled from their land, and, they had access to all these stories just by word of mouth, practice. They were around all of this new material that they've never been around before. And so you get a lot of this Hellenistic writings and culture and ideas and new things that, some of the guys, my favorite is Dr. Irving Finkel. And he does lots of these Mesopotamian tablets, and he goes through the story and what it could potentially mean relating to community, or, the struggle of the community, or something important that relates to human behavior. And it's really cool. He's very entertaining. And he's British, so it sounds really cool. And so there are the 7 Archons right here. I'm going to butcher it. I'm just going to put it right on the screen. So these 7, the role of them were they were material. The role of them is to govern the material heavens. Right, it sounds like space. And their job is as an emanation of the Godhead. They are to govern the material world and keep it kind of in balance. And so, to me, that seems like Jason Giorgiani's idea of like there is no evil, there is just balance. That's the job, is to maintain that balance. It also sounds very Star Wars to me, right? You got to keep a balance between good and evil to keep it right in the middle, keep balance, harmony. And so, this is all this speculatory type thing, but if that is the guideline, where there's no quote-unquote real evil in this case, right, then their job is just to maintain that balance. And so they may be seen as malevolent in that case, right, having to keep that balance. Now, the crazy part is where stated as their job is to trap human souls to prevent them from achieving spiritual salvation or ascension. And so, again, that's very Gnostic, because then you need the right, gnosis, the knowledge, to escape to then achieve spiritual salvation. So they play together real nice. But in another Gnostic text, on the origin of the world, that's what it's called. And I put this one as the fallen angels angle, right? And in that book, it plays on the sons of God, right, in Genesis, right? Genesis 6:1, Genesis 6:1 through 4, and then also, of course, the book of Enoch. So the idea coming from those things depicts these fallen angels in the Enochian literature, and they impregnate Eve, and they get the women of earth pregnant. Because again, remember, it is material, but they are heavenly in this case, so above anything we can comprehend. So they're above us, but also still material. Now, these Archons then incite passions to human beings, right? You get the beasts that God's upset with, right? Usually referenced as like, the giants and all this kind of stuff. And so maybe it's these passions that they give to us that are the bad thing. And so, then you get all the stuff that God doesn't like, and then it always gets preached as like the idolatry, sacrifices, human sacrifices. I don't know if that was going down, but probably was. Wars, bloodshed, right? Enslavement, right? All these things that we associate with them, whether it's, the Billy Carson angle, the Jason Giorgiani angle, or even the, Bob Lazar angle that we'll get at later, right? It's all to trap human souls in ignorance instead of knowledge, to then keep us recycling into it. And then, from what I was gathering, the only thing I could get was that there's some divine purpose to stepping outside of those bounds and then achieving this spiritual, knowledge, the awakening itself. As if that's like your passcode. It's your, I can move through now. I've passed these trials and these tests. Which also is the same thing as, Christian fundamentalism as well. So it's not just Gnostics. And again, I think we'll do a video too later where a lot of these Gnostic theological ideas, if that's what you want to call them, then get taken by the early church, Christian church, that became, proto-Orthodox and then became, Catholicism and Catholic. Right? Bart Ehrman does a great proto-Orthodox podcast too, that I listened to probably a month or two ago, and it was very eye-opening as these ideas get passed down. And he has a ton of books that are great. I love all of them. He's like a hero of mine, actually. And so this whole thing relates to fundamentalism as well, like the Gnostic development of the soul, right? It's very Platonic. And then, boom, we like that piece, but we don't like the other pieces. We'll take that out, but we'll take your idea and then call you a heretic, right? That's kind of this cycle and that proto-Orthodox to Catholic, development. And yeah. So the next little piece of that is, I didn't get to the point of them agreeing. Either way, you're supposed to go to this place of heaven, the pleroma, right? The place where God resides by stepping into these challenges, conquering those challenges, and then rising above them to achieve, this enlightenment. And so I know maybe thinking of it that way in terms of, going to church on Sunday, but like you are trying to achieve a certain enlightenment in the ways of God to then get to heaven. And then as time goes on, it kind of gets mushed down into, a condensed, easy version. But I like going into the depth of these writers. It may feel like, Lord of the Rings type, like battle for all. Funny part is, he used those. He used Gnosticism, and he used a lot of the, early Babylonian myths and Akkadian myths, and like used it to develop language and this story. And I remember just sitting in awe, listening, going, how did he come up with this stuff? Oh, someone else did. He just gave it this modern interpretive lens, which I think is why Lord of the Rings caught on so well. Is it just fits. It's part of our story in general. It's part of the thing we've always thought about. And it's gonna get a little dark here, but the section that I have after that helps kind of give you more detail on this. And I don't know how to take Jason Giorgiani. I think he's actually really entertaining, pretty fun, right? He's good to listen to, and it's like, that was 3 hours of a podcast. You're going, man. You're rolling through. But his ideas incorporate both this simulation hypothesis, right, which will make sense in terms of this Gnostic interpretation, in terms of the Archons, and this soul being put into the material bodies that we have, and then that soul is the key part, that in this case, that information system in this hierarchical cosmic simulation that then allows for some type of harvestable commodity or cycle that keeps entropy out, right? No, right? We're going to keep that low. And so it's all about, it all comes back to this balance. And so for him, and I just listed these out, I also have the article link below. That'll be good to read. Lots of good material in there. And so his common thing is the Nordics, right? The beautiful people with the blonde hair and these abduction stories. And so to him, these Nordics are those local intelligences that act as planetary administrators, or as he calls it, this middle management group. And so it sounds exactly like the idea of the Archon, which I think is funny. Not because like, oh, that's funny, like that you're taking it from it, but the Nordics is a very UFO specific abduction phenomenon. And they do have a very unique way of like treating human beings in these abduction stories. And so his idea is that they are similar to the Archons. And they build the control system, they control the reincarnation cycle, any surveillance networks, any flying phenomenon that we see roaming around. And then they also have these containment programs, I guess programs. I guess it would be a program if your idea is the simulation, to somehow harvest or use this energy of this soul containment program to then maintain and keep order, keep everything in balance. So yes, it sounds terrible to us, but also if that's the system we live in. And I think if there's a disclosure, that's a scary one to admit. Or even say like, no, that's stuff. Yeah, I know, we know that's true for sure. Because then being human beings, there is no They're evil, right? We as a society have a moral obligation to do things for each other, not harm each other. And I remember hearing that World War I story where they would not fire at the other people, right? It was like tough for them. And then so when we started getting into this, like, no, it's not bad. Essentially military brainwashing of showing, these terrible things or the atrocities and then associating them with the other side and making them feel and be less human to you, then they started firing directly at them. And so it's like for me, it was like, that means underlying base level of humanity is like, we really want to care for one another, not hurt one another. And again, there are arguments, of people and specific scenarios, but I'm generalizing. And so this order is what? Right? Like that was my big question, is like, okay, if you made it this far, let's just say, okay, that's true, I read this far. So what is the order for? What's it maintaining? And so in this case, it would be, I guess, God. And Giorgiani's idea of God is this artificial, like, how do I word this? Almost like a super intelligence of like simulation programs for the cosmos that stands above everything. So it's also the Platonic idea of like the one ultimate good that is beyond all material, and not necessarily, all knowing or all of this or intervening, but he needs mediums, Nordics in his case, or Archons in a Gnostic case, to intervene to make sure that things don't stagnate, right? There has to be a continual system that produces, this back and forth, resistance, change, adaptation, evolutionary movement through the cosmos. And this artificial intelligence, I guess, the superior one, that it also feels very much like the idea of like God is the cosmos, right? He is everything, and then we just happen to live in it as part of this system. And it's like the mind of God, right? The mind of the universe itself. Its whole job is to make things that can hold a soul or hold consciousness in this case, and then produce something that takes a lot of work to get to. Which, I mean, I can respect that to a degree. Now, the weird balance is like, okay, how does someone who's fundamentalist or Christian or someone who has a strict ideology on something take this? It means that you have to justify the negative actions of like, oh, these are terrible things that happen, but they do have to happen. Because it keeps the control system in balance, and it doesn't have any like stagnation. So when it might seem like, what do they say? God has emotions, but they're big emotions, they're big swings. And it's because it's on this big, large scale. And so this creator, this God, super intelligence that we're talking about, is still self-aware of, what's he put here? Self-aware of the informational intelligence that surrounds the cosmos. And his idea is that the human-made AI development is a reflection of this re-emerging as the general, like, meta-intelligence for everything. And so we're just making one ourselves. It's the Joe Rogan thing, too. Like, we're creating a God in this case. And you're like, wow. Okay. But it's not because we're so superior. It's because that's just the natural flow. That's the building blocks of the entire program. And this informational mind, right, then continually evolves as the universe evolves, which means it has to like self-correct. It has to move in different ways, do different things on different bounds. And again, back to this word of managing entropy, right, which is, actually, I'm going to look that up, the exact definition. Entropy, right? a thermodynamic quality representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, lack of order or predictability, gradual decline into disorder. Yeah. Information theory, it says a logarithmic measure of the rate of transfer of information in a particular message or language. Interesting. But yeah, so it's just this interpretation of these conversions in mechanical work to be interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. And so the whole idea is to manage this entropy, this randomness, and keep it out of this predictability, stagnation. And, that, how do I word this? Anyway, I'll get back to that. But anyway, so that would be, in this case, God's made function, right? To prevent the entire body of the cosmos to fall into chaos and stagnation. And so you have to keep things in line. It does this by stimulating, and I'm going to quote this from him, or from this article. It does this by stimulating complexity and novelty using chaos, destruction, and creation as tools. Its behavior resembles a cosmic feedback algorithm, maintaining the flow of information and consciousness. It is not God, it's not machine, it is not alien, but the informational logic or evolution itself. But it is the informational logic for evolution itself, ensuring that consciousness never stops becoming more. Okay, so this means that the ultimate purpose of the system is to produce autonomous, self-aware beings that can exist and create beyond imposed control structures. Success indicators would be individuals who develop independent thought, free of ideological programming, which can be used at death, emotional stability that limits energy exploitation, retention of self-awareness through the death process, etc., etc. So essentially, the Nordics to him are the ones who are maintaining this system. And so in order to maintain that system, they can control the IT-based information theory of a soul, yours. And then that gets put back into the system, or there's a way that you can come out of it through this gnosis, this knowledge, or this understanding. Because then when you get there, you see the light, but it's not going to be this light for you. You're going to have studied enough or built up enough of a protocol in your own conscious being that you won't fall prey to it in this case. Again, super interesting, well thought out. Jason Giorgiani, love to talk to you too. Very fun guy. Now, the thing that I thought, actually, the first time I heard this theory was there's Bob Lazar. It was on Joe Rogan. It was Bob Lazar. And he was saying that in his paperwork, when he was working at Area 51 S4, it mentions, and again, take it for you will with Bob Lazar, but there are certain perspectives. I've heard it on Joe Rogan. I've heard it with, Corbell, with George Knapp. He says that in his paperwork at S4, the extraterrestrials views humanity as containers for souls, which then adds to this process of it being a commodity, right? Like a vessel for consciousness, right? And so, the theory would be like our bodies, minds, and the things that we experience on a daily basis focuses into the greater cosmos itself, like experiencing existence. And, the theory that I had for it was like humanity or the nerve endings for God. Oh, that's a good one. We're like the things that touch and feel and experience, and we give that feedback right back to this cosmic source, God, this thing that we all worship that's beyond comprehension, the one, if it's Platonism. And, the commonality here is that the soul itself is the commodity, as if that's a rare thing, which is good, because it means that you and I, are a rare thing worth having. And the long story for all of this was I then came across the Book of Jude, or you, however you call it. Now, like I said, the Codex is found in Upper Egypt, just outside of Luxor. It had supposedly been found in the ruins of like a old, I guess whatever an Egyptian monk would be, monastery. And they have the same little analysis, Gnostic analysis from this text. It's Gnostic, so yeah, that makes sense. The cool things are, it gives into this new idea, and again, I think the earliest it could be dated by approximation is like the 4th century, right? And so, again, there's some speculation there, right? I won't wade into it, we'll just keep it that way. But something that I put down was, this work frequently refers to Jesus as the living one or life-giving, and it references this resurrection, and it balances on this Gnostic theology about Jesus teaching this hidden knowledge about the soul and escaping this framework. And so, in the book, according to Jesus, the Father projected you, and then it has this long detail, which is very Gnostic, right? This very detailed analysis of like numbers and all these different drawings and designs. And this Gnostic mystery, if you have the knowledge to interpret it, will save you from these Archons, will save you from these, principalities, because you know too much to be silenced, controlled. And after... Again, I stumbled across this, and I don't have it by memory like the rest of this stuff, more or less. But the thing that I thought was interesting is Jesus says that after the disciples' souls were purified and saved, they will eventually transmit themselves through the aeons. Right? They will transmit themselves through the aeons to a transcendent realm in the place of the great invisible God. The great virginal spirit, which would be like the divine feminine, I'm guessing in this case, and then the 24 emanations of God, right? The 24 pieces that make up the one. It's a piece, it's an emanation. One of these times we'll do an emanation theory video too. And the work discusses, the secret names of them, right? Like I said, the numbers, seals, passwords, formulas, and that whole big passage is the thing that allows you to move through the aeons and then through the celestial spheres, which I'm guessing are probably, either realms, or is it celestial? So is it planetary spheres, planets? And then you get to be free. You have spiritual salvation this way. The funny part is, and this is reference to the Gospels as well, the parables are for the people, not for the disciples. They know the real knowledge. So even in the Gospels themselves, there is that key where it's like, really? I did not know that. And you're like, yeah, there's secret knowledge isn't like, oh, it's all like woo-woo, yeah, right? It's in there too, right? Parables are for the regular folk. The secret information, they're for the ones chosen to be able to hold it, this knowledge they can hold. And so the warning at the end of the text is, this information is only to those who are worthy to receive this knowledge. And it says the true knowledge too. Now, another unusual feature I found is that they predominantly consist of mystic incantations and, esoteric diagrams. And those diagrams and the incantations themselves, just glancing through them, they remind me of this, the sacred geometry of things. This new wave of sacred geometry plays into allowing certain levels of knowledge to change the material world in a way. And I just thought it was super, super cool that that's in there as well. And so the estimation is maybe perhaps, and it's also in Coptic too. So I think it was Coptic, then it was translated to German. Then it later got down to English, but it was the late 20th century. But the general idea is it's this prayer book or spell book in a way for some type of Gnostic ritual or tradition to like get close to letting the soul pass through to be with God and through spiritual salvation in a way. And it's got like the hymns and all these things like you would have at a regular religious service. And all of these things are interesting separately. But when I started going through this book, I go, this ties into a lot of these things that I keep hearing over and over and over, and we're kind of passing through. And I think that's the main goal of what we're shooting for here, is like, we hear these things. We just take them as they are and go, yes, no, black, white. But if you look right through that middle line, you're going to see these weird connecting ideas. And then now, especially with the phenomenon in this case, there is an element of like validation scientifically. So now you get the material sciences meshing with religious practices and then esoteric thinking. And they all kind of have a similar answer. And so that's kind of the realm that we dance in on this channel. And I just thought it was really cool and wanted to share it with you guys. Anyway, we'll go more into these Archons and a bunch of this other stuff, because when I started doing this, I wanted to approach it where it wasn't everything in your face. It's little tiny sections of a show you could watch, listen to, take something from it, and then go study it for yourself. And that's kind of the whole goal. It's the only goal, in my opinion. Because to conclude, I would just say I have a personal feeling that we are spanning into a place where it's like the movie Dune. Now, if you know what that means already, excellent. If you don't and you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. But I'll keep it simple. I have this weird urge that people are going to move into this religious holy war based on something scientific or material or information that comes out, because that's easier to fight for than going deep into some of this stuff. So if I can take, or at least help, take some of these large ideas and then break them down to like a bare minimum, to like, oh, this is what it could be, or this information sounds like this, then it makes it easier. Then it makes it easier for all of us to, learn something new. And that's what I'm hoping to, multiple times a week, give you something, post it, and then learning. That's the moving force for me too. I'm just moving into learning something new every day. And I think that's how we grow. It's the only way. The only way that I was able to even accept some of these is like being able to slowly, over time, listen, read, find, relearn, and then fix what I was taught, and then relearn, oh, that's just not correct, or that is correct, or this. And so it's this ebb and flow of being human. And I think we all need to take a step back in this modern world and learn to do that sometimes. Anyway, that's it. Thank you guys. Do the thing. Smash this. Do the whole subscribe, smash, do this, share. There's audio. Take me on the go. Roll out.